We are live with Ryan Cooper from Bike Split, Training Peaks. I'm super excited about this episode. Ryan is going to talk about AI and the future of training. There are a few technical difficulties here, so if there's any feedback. But Ryan has got some cool drawings he's going to show and walk through this presentation. So Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you. Enlighten us on the future of AI and training.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having this. This is awesome. Especially putting it all together just really quickly and kind of getting us all involved in this. And it's something I think everybody was thinking about, and it was nice to have you really get everybody to do this. Normally when you and I talk, it's a lot of times it's about best bike split. But recently, I guess in the last probably year and a half, my role at Training Peaks has shifted a little bit to where I'm not focusing as much on the performance side of things, kind of the high end performance, but more focusing on kind of future endeavors. So let's say the 2 to 5 year kind of horizon type of plans. And we started that about 2 years ago, so we're finally starting to see the initial kind of fruits of the things we started a couple years ago. So with that in mind, I wanted to really kind of dive into what my background is, and then start at I always like to start at the big picture and then work my way down to the smaller stuff and the detail. And I'll everybody will have to excuse the presentation. I've been watching a ton of, now I'm a homeschool dad. So I've been watching a ton of Khan Academy. And I really enjoy how they take a complicated subject and boil it down into something that is understandable by everybody. And so if people want to get into more details than I get into today, because I'm going to kind of keep it at a higher level, feel free to contact me afterwards, and we can go into as much, nerd out as much as we want, after this is over. But first off, my name is Ryan Cooper. I founder of Best Bike Split, chief scientist at Training Peaks. But before all of that, I started as an electrical engineer, and so kind of started in the defense industry. And realized after a few years that wasn't really an area that I saw myself long term. So I went back to school, studied applied mathematics and operations research. Got my master's degree, and then started my PhD program. And during my PhD program, I was still trying to train for Ironman and train for triathlon. And I realized how difficult it was to work, be doing a full-time PhD, and trying to train. And when you have no money because you're working and you're spending a bunch of money on college and all these things, then it's really hard to train because it's hard to get a coach. It's hard to do these things. So for one of my dissertation topic, I decided to look into how can I do kind of this, I don't want to call it an AI, we'll get into that in a minute, but how can I do this kind of optimized model to coach me, right? Can I get a model to coach me as well as a coach would? Or at least to some percentage of what a coach would. And so I spent about 6 months developing this model, and the key for me was availability and schedule. So I know that I was going to be very busy, and so I could only get in workouts. I needed to fit them in wherever I could. And so could I create a model that could look at my overall schedule and basically come up with this training plan for me? And so after some time, we came up with this model. I actually ended up getting certified as a triathlon coach through USAT, not because I actually wanted to go into coaching, though I have a huge respect for those that do. There's some really, really good coaches out there. But I wanted to test this model and see, could I submit the outputs of this model as the final exam in the USAT? They give you, at the time they gave you 2 or 3 scenarios of an athlete training for something. And so I basically wanted to see, could the model pass this exam, right, for me? So could I basically cheat? So sorry, USAT, if you watch. But yeah, so could I cheat? And it did pretty well. I got a B plus, I think. I got like 88 or something like that. So I felt like it had the periodization. It had a lot of things that they were looking for, taking injuries into account, taking those kind of things. So, that was, to me, that was this validation that, okay, there could be something to this computer-based training. A buddy and I, Rich Harville, we decided, hey, let's build a company around that. And the output of that was a company called Optimized Training Labs. And I believe this is about the time I first met Flow Cycling, Trainer Road, a few other people, and you guys were kind of inspirations to like say, hey, let's hey, you guys just went and started a wheel company. Let me see if I can do this training thing, right? And it didn't take off as well as I had hoped, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And I think after all this time, I've kind of contemplated on why it didn't do as well as I was hoping. And part of this talk is going to go into that. But what did happen is we pivoted and started Best Bike Split out of that, and that did take off a lot faster than we had anticipated. So it was actually we made it as a marketing thing for the training platform. So it was like, oh, okay, we were going to do this thing where we could predict your time and show you how to ride these races with these different weather things, and then that was going to open the funnel up to the training thing. And one spun up quite faster than the other. So anyway, to make a long story short, that's kind of where I came from and how I looked at training. And Best Bike Split took off. We followed that for some time, and then now at Training Peaks, we wanted to look back at that and say, how can we take aspects of that kind of computer-based, machine-based training, but with a different slant to it, where how can we bring the coaches into it? And I think one of the main faults with the original concept was that we were trying to be the coach, right? And so now you're a competitor against all the other coaches, whereas there's so many great coaches out there that have proven methodologies and proven track records. Why aren't we working with these coaches to help them, right? Whether it's expand their funnel, expand their base, or take some of the workload off in terms of let's automate the things that computers do really well, and let's free up coaches to do what coaches really do well, which is coaching. So with that in mind, I kind of want to jump into this 10,000 foot view of the way we kind of look at the world at Training Peaks, and it's pretty similar to the way most I guess feedback loop systems kind of work with data, right? So if anybody's ever seen, and so I'm going to try and do this dual screen thing, but I'm going to have to do it with pen and paper, so bear with me. If anybody's ever seen kind of the this is my little paper and my pen here. The data analytics life cycle. You kind of have these. So you kind of have a chart, right? And on the bottom is complexity, and then value is over here, right? And so at Training Peaks and at a lot of Strava, Training Peaks, a lot of these companies, you kind of start off with you have low-ish complexity and pretty decent value. It goes up and down the thing, but you kind of have data, right? And so you have this data bucket, and you're visualizing this data. You put data analytics in this kind of bucket, and as you start to move up the chain, you kind of say, okay, well, we have data, but what can we do with that data? Well, so eventually we kind of get to this predictive, right? If I can spell right. So you kind of get to this predictive stage, right? Okay, now we have all this data about you. Now we can kind of predict things about you. We can predict your 10K runtime. We can predict all these kind of various things about you. And that's interesting, and that's pretty cool, and it gets you somewhere. But that's still just saying, given what we know about you, here's what we think you can do. The next stage of that is prescriptive, right? Prescriptive, if I can spell that. Prescriptive. So given like what we know about you, how do we get you to that? How can we get you to the next step? Like what can we do to help you hone that in, right? And then finally, like the last one is optimal or optimized. Now, given all these other constraints, how do we optimize things specifically for you? So like we have all your data, we know things about you, now we can predict things about you, now we can prescribe things to make sure those predictions come true. But then finally, how can we like really tailor everything and every little piece of it to make it completely individual? And so when you kind of think about that, like most of our time has been spent in this data, and now we have so much of it. Um, we're starting to see a lot of the predictive stuff. So, best bike split, that's one thing that we were kind of focused on for a long time was, given what we know about your power, about the wind conditions, about all this stuff, let's predict your time. And then you move on and say, okay, well, let's not just predict the time, let's prescribe how you should ride it, how you should ride that course to get that specific time, right? And then eventually, as you start to put feedback loops in place, you can get to this optimal. It's like, how can we take you from what we know you can do now to what we think you can do? Where's your potential? And so that's kind of this complexity to value general analytics chart, right? And this is used in every, pretty much every company or like industry. It's kind of the same thing around processes. And if you think of training, it's really just a process, right? You start the process, you get feedback, you refine the process, and you kind of go on and on. So with that in mind, let's kind of talk about the first step for AI. And AI is thrown around a lot. It's kind of like big data used to be thrown around a lot, and then AI gets thrown around a lot. But really, when you boil it down, it's just algorithms and tools to help machines take data and come out with an output, right, an outcome. And that outcome could be a prediction. That outcome could be some kind of training regimen. It could be any kind of output, but it's still going to be limited by the types of data that you input. And what my wife always likes to say is, you need to use the right tool for the right job, and that's true in data analytics. Like, if my wife's a surgeon, and sometimes she always likes to say, sometimes you need a syringe, or sometimes you need a scalpel, and sometimes you need a bone saw. And so you don't, if you need something that's a blunt force and it's not very smart, use that. But if you need something very precise and whatever else, use that. And so that's kind of my goal at Training Peaks, and with the things that we look at is use the right tools for the right job. And AI doesn't solve everything, right? A random forest or any of the various models that you can throw into something, it doesn't solve every problem. Sometimes it's much simpler, and sometimes it can be more complex. So when you kind of start with the observation, the data to the prediction, that's a pretty big leap when you come to training, right? And so what I always like to think about is this idea of potential, right? And so given an athlete's starting point A, what is their final potential B, right? Because that's I guess there's a lot of factors that go into that. And I like to use the example of, I could have a CTL or a training load or whatever you want to call it of 160 and be working out 30 hours a week. And Ryan Hall could be sitting on his couch eating bonbons. And if we go do a 10K, he's going to run 2 minutes per mile faster than me, right? No matter what. It doesn't matter that I'm more fit than he is, right? So his potential pace, his potential is higher than me for that particular goal in that sport. And so I think one area that AI can really be beneficial in is this idea given a certain sport, you have a starting point. Again, there's a little chart, but you have the starting point, and uh, you're here at A, whatever it may be. It may be an 8-minute mile, right? And then by some amount of time, so if we look at time as this axis here, at some amount of time, I have a potentially of being able to run, a 6-minute mile for whatever that distance is. And what you're going to see that AI helps with is you have these probability ranges, right? So this range is my potential somewhere in here. And the better the AI, the better we can kind of classify a person, or the better that we can cluster individuals based on factors that we know here, we can start to narrow this gap. So we can say, hey, with a 90% probability, you can get to that given this amount of time, right? It's always a function of time, in effort, of course, right? So you have to put in the actual work. But I think, like, for us, if we can start to think about it that way and start to get to this idea of how do we get to somebody's potential in various sports and various disciplines within the sports, then we can start to look at goal setting, right? So once you know somebody's potential and you have some idea of this time, then you can start to get to goal setting. So basically the idea of, given some, given some distance, some race, some event, get fitter, whatever, something that has a time associated with it, then we can say, like, okay, here's your goal. Given this amount of time for a 10K, your goal, that goal is equal a 6:20 mile, right? Pace. So we can start to say, hey, given we know this race, or you have this thing on your calendar, or you want to get fitter by the end of the year, or whatever it is, then we know your potential. We know you can get to this kind of number. The other way to look at it is, given a goal, we can say, like, here's how much time it takes, right? So you go the other way with it, and so you can say, hey, I want to do a 3-hour marathon. Well, if you are able to do that, like, if that is on your potential chart, here's the time it's going to take, and here's the amount it's going to take, the amount of work it's going to take. So, when I look at AI, I start to look at these components. It's not just one thing. It's like, okay, can we cluster athletes to say, group them into potential? And a lot of times, like, if you look at WKO 4 or 5, they have phenotyping. So for a cyclist, it's saying, hey, this person's a sprinter, this person's a TT, or this person is, pursuiter, or whatever it is. And you can say, like, okay, this person's potential may be higher for that particular thing. And so can we say, in that particular line of training, can we get them from, a 1 hour and 5 minute 40K TT to a sub hour, right? And those are the kind of things that we start to look at. And you'll notice I haven't even talked about training yet. This is really just all about, like, trying to get at classifying or kind of a starting point for an athlete and what they potentially could do. Once we start talking about training, there's a lot of different methodologies, but it kind of comes down to, there's a lot of different methodologies, but they're ultimately, fitness or CTL or load. A lot of people say CTL, no matter how you calculate it, whether you do it as TSS or whether you do it as RP times time or whatever it is, it's still just a time-dependent function. So ultimately, fitness is dependent on time. So again, if you think, I'll draw my little graph again. If you look at, let's say, a general periodization scheme, right? And so you kind of have these, let's see if I can get this. This is taking a lot of fingers in there. There we go. Oh no, it turned off. No. So
I'll let you get that back up. That's pretty cool. I think one of the things that you're talking about now is the idea of, there are so many different training methods, right? I mean, there's concepts
right.
like optimize. Uh, Geez, I'm drawing a blank on it. Polarized training theory. There's basic training based off functional threshold. All of these different things. And so you're trying to determine what's best for the athlete. I think that's where you're going.
Yeah, exactly. And so, um, but as somebody that, so either way you look at it, somebody that has 10 hours to train versus somebody that's got 30 hours to train, um, basically your CTL or your load or your fitness is going to be limited by that time, right? So
Mm.
you can only do so many extremely hard efforts to ramp up your stress load, right? And so if you have the chart I was basically going to draw is no matter, if you have this periodization that kind of works its way up over time, there's going to be a plateau for a 10-hour athlete. There's going to be a plateau for a 30-hour athlete, et cetera. So if you look at Kate Courtney, who's really, really strong, probably best in the world at mountain biking, and her coach, Jim Miller, and I talked quite a bit. And if you look at how she trains, she may have a different periodization scheme than the typical 3 on, 1 off, or those kind of methodologies. But when she's on, she's really on, and when she's off, she's really off. And she's training 30 plus hours a week, so she may get up to 160, 170 CTO on those on weeks, right? And then really put herself in the hole, and then recover really hard. But she just has that time, and so the more time you have, the more load you can accumulate over time. So, and so when you kind of think about your goal, and um, you think about fitness, it's important, to keep in mind that, again, higher CTL does not always equal better performance than another. You can only compare it to yourself. So typically, if you are more fit or you have higher CTL than you did the year before, and your other metrics are the same, you're going to perform better. Meaning, if you're trying to go a long distance and your FTP is the same, but you had more load in training, then theoretically should be able to perform better. But it doesn't mean some gifted athlete's not going to come out there and beat you off of not training very much at all. And so I say all this because when we start to look at AI, you start to think about how is this going to what training methodology and what kind of those loads and ramp rates and fitness versus performance, like how do you weight all those and for the athlete and their goal? So if you're an athlete and your goal is a 1 hour time trial, then you may not need 160 CTL, right? Like you may only need to train 10 hours a week, but those need to be really quality. So you look at like a lot of the trainer road sweet spot stuff and increasing your FTP, it's increasing your performance, but you're going to plateau on your CTL, but that's okay if your performance continues to increase, right?
It's interesting you say this because one of the things when I was riding a bike, I didn't ride enough hours to get really, really fit, but I rode enough hours to do something, right?
Right.
So it's like if you would have had all those data points on me, you would have been able to predict something, and then what's the best prescription for me to optimize with the time that I have?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah, it jumps right into the next topic, which is kind of feedback loops, right? So you come up with this best starting point, and so I think that's where an AI, another component of AI is can we, for this athlete, given what we know about them, given know about their history, and now given what we know, and it's back to my original problem when I was in grad school, is given what we know about their future outlook, like how things are going to look schedule wise, right? Can we map them from point A to B and find them the best method that can get them there, right? And so I kind of think about it like GPS navigation, right? you have a starting point, you have this goal, and we've potentially helped you define what that goal is or what it potentially could be. But it's never going to be a straight line, right? And so what you want to do is you want to look at it, and just like the Google Maps does when you're trying to drive somewhere, like it maps out that path, right? But you know things about your future. You know you're going on vacation. You don't have access to your bike. You know that your kid's soccer game's on Saturday, so you're not going to do your long bike ride or whatever. Whatever these different constraints are, and so you route. Your overarching route takes that into account. That doesn't mean there's not going to be deviations while you're doing it, right? And so what you're talking about is kind of what I look at as like macro adjustments or plan level adjustments, meaning that you're not responding well to this method, so maybe the method changes, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe periodization changes. Then there's the kind of micro level adjustments, which is more like the HRV for training, the trend analysis, the go no go. I woke up today, got a horrible hangover. I need some kind of adjustment, right? It's like that's a micro adjustment. But even when you do those, I think somebody was creating a optimized training like program, and or an AI based training program, and they were using like a chess analogy, which is a good analogy, but it was you make a move, and then your body or something makes a move, and you're constantly adjusting everything. But I think that kind of ties one hand behind your back, because if you look at it from the overarching like holistic view, you already know where some of the pieces on the board are, right? You know where they're going to be. So if you just make minor tweaks all the time, you're just, it's constantly moving this way. But if you can see the whole thing and you make a minor tweak and you know how it can have down ripple effects, then you might be able to make a better overall strategy. So that's kind of how we look at it. Is more of this like, let's do these micro trends, but make sure we keep the big picture, or micro or trend analysis adjustments, but make sure we keep the bigger picture of life constraints and things like in view when we do the models and do the overall like kind of training for it. And with that said, we ultimately at Training Peaks, we're built by coaches for coaches, right? We're a platform that helps coaches and athletes connect, and we do have athlete offerings and analysis tools and things like that. But kind of at our core is, providing a conduit for coaches to help their athletes. And so with that in mind, when we look at AI and training, and we look at the models and things that we're developing now and the APIs, it's around this coach persona concept, meaning if a coach has a methodology, a coach has a way that they would do things. Well, we want to make sure that for each coach that uses this, like it does what they would do, right? And they can still have oversight of it. So meaning that if an athlete's not feeling well, hey, do they care about power? Do they care about RPE? Do they care about sleep? Do they care about HRV? Like all those different metrics. Well, for that persona, if they really care about sleep, well, that model is going to implement some kind of sleep, tracking into it and adjust based on that, as long as the athlete's compliant with it. If that coach only cares about RPE, how did you feel today? How did you feel after your workout? It was supposed to be a 3, but you said it was a 7, every time. Like, okay, there's something going on. So let's make sure that we surface that and use that data. And similarly, their workouts, their pedagogy, or their, whether it's a Hal Higdon, just straight progression, or it's an 80-20 or, something like that. We want to make sure that coach's, mindset and persona is built into their own kind of AI bot, whatever you want to call it. My wife says that it's like Futurama, and you put their little head in the jar.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of little heads. So anyway, so that's kind of how we're approaching it at Training Peaks. And the first one we've implemented we did as a test run, which was the Run with Hal app. So it's basically Hal Higdon's new training app. We built that in house as a test bed to say, like, hey, here's a coach that has been doing this for 40 years
Yep.
or plus. He's 86, I think.
Yep.
Um, and he wanted to, capture a lot of his, his plans, his mindset, how he looks at training. And he was on board with it. And so we kind of ran with it with him and developed the app. And it's using that as a test bed for all the things I talked about today. So can we say, based on simple input, what we think you can do today, what we think you can do tomorrow, set you on a path, whether you call that like a decision tree or whatever you want to call it, like set you on a path and say, is this the path you're supposed to be on, or should we jump you to a new path? Are you really a novice? Maybe you're an advanced. Maybe your speed is increasing so fast that you just have a natural ability that you didn't even know about, right? Those kind of things.
Yeah.
And so that's our first test bed of it. And the next step is then to start to open that up and say, hey, Hal's big into RP and big into that kind of stuff, but another coach may care a lot more about HRV or other metrics that are out there. And so start working with other coaches that have other methodologies and other metrics that they care about to test this kind of back end system.
How is the app going today? You guys put it out as a test, and what are you seeing?
Yeah, no, it's I think I don't know if I'm supposed to give out numbers, but closing in on 6-figure downloads, and I think we're at like 4.5, and it's trending upwards, right? Like 4.5 star in Google and Google and iOS, and it's making the trends are in the right direction, right?
And are you seeing improvement from the people using it?
What's that?
People are improving. The data is showing their.
Yeah. So the great thing is that we're getting a lot of really, really positive feedback, not just the reviews, but people that have used Hal forever and are, Hal's a big name in the running community for novice runners, right? And although we've had some Boston people using it as well, I guess now in September, and people are getting faster, but we kind of took a slow approach. So we started with the scheduling piece, mostly because that's my background is in that kind of area in terms of modeling, scheduling things really quickly, hence Best Bike Split. And really just a big scheduling model. But so we started with that so that you can adapt around your availability, because most people that are more novice, don't have as much time. So you really have to squeeze this training in around your availability. And now we've started to integrate more things around those micro adjustments, meaning, hey, we noticed your run speeds are consistently faster, but your RP is still like in line. So we need to either bump you into a new path, or we need to change your workout structure, right, to accommodate that. And then change your goal time too. So those kind of things. So we're starting to get into that. And then the real cool thing that I'm excited about is taking in unplanned workouts, meaning that you go do other things on the side, and most people do, but how does that impact your actual training towards your goal? And can we give you well, not we, can the computer can Hal give you recommendations on the best ways to incorporate those, meaning that I'm training for this marathon, but I also are going to go do these bike rides.
Yeah.
I just killed myself on Zwift or on Trainer Road or whatever else, and I'm supposed to have this super hard interval tomorrow, or whatever it is. Like, how would Hal normally react to that? Would he say like, maybe you shouldn't be doing those before these, or maybe it's better to move those to Saturday, or whatever whatever it is. So that's kind of our next big step, which I'm really excited about. And
something you may actually hide from your real coach because he's going to get mad at you, but the software will be more lenient and say, hey, maybe.
Well, it's funny. Like we released this feature and it was around compliance, right? And the idea being like kind of race readiness. How compliant are you to the plan and this grading system kind of thing? And again, we were using HAL as a test bed for things that could potentially go into Training Peaks or other places in the future. And and it was funny. People do not like a computer to tell them things, right? Like they don't like bad things from the computer. And so um, what I found is it's kind of like this psychology or social whatever like experiment where you have if you don't view, and I'm the same way, if you don't view like missing your workout as something that you consciously did, then you don't want to be told that that's going to hurt your overall race readiness. You know what I mean? So it's like if my kid got sick, so I didn't do my run today. Well, I'm not going to be as ready as I was. And, the app was saying like, oh, we saw you missed your workout and that, that could impact your future thing because of this. Nobody likes to hear that.
No.
But if they actively chose to miss it, then they do want to hear it. If that makes sense. So they want to get chastised. If they just said, I don't feel like it, I'm going to skip it today. The next day they want to feel like, oh man, yeah, you're right. I should have done that. So now what should I change now? But if it was, something else, outside of their control, they
like a priority. So the priority shifted to their kid. They don't want to be
right.
up for not missing their workout because, well, I had to take
right.
care of my kid. But if they were just sitting on the couch watching TV, then it's like, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So it's hard for the app to know that. But, we'll have to add, like, why did you miss your workout?
Yeah.
Step in there.
You'll have Hal, and you'll have like a therapist in there at the same time, like work on.
Yeah, a little floating one. Yeah, we did tone down. I think we toned down the language on that a little bit and got the HAL approval on all the language and stuff for those kind of things. But ultimately, the app, it's nice because if that does happen, right? Let's say you missed a workout or something comes up last minute. It's doing those micro adjustments, but not just like, let me just change this week, right? It's saying like, let me look at this holistically and say, was that workout important? How important was that workout to the overall goal? If it was just base miles and then your key workouts today, it's probably not going to do anything, right? But if it was a really key workout and it's something that Hal, he marked that as saying like, these are the ones that really impact your overall performance, then it's probably going to reschedule that to a time that you can do it, as it makes sense. So.
Cool. Do you ever see Training Peaks giving athletes the ability, once they start getting data in there and they start to see what it is, will it push them in a direction that says, we believe this type of training or this type of coach would be really good for you? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think like this, a recommendation kind of thing. We would do it with the coaches, obviously, so in mind, and make sure that one of our core customer bases is okay with that. But I think for the majority of athletes, you and I probably deal with the very pointy end. Even recreational athletes are a lot of times the ones that we see often are kind of this pointy end, and most of Training Peaks are too, right? So if you look at the bell curve of athletes, Training Peaks, WKO, best bike splits off the screen, whatever, like that's all over here.
Yeah.
Triathletes are typically on that side of it. Whereas, the recreational Al Higdon like type runners are more kind of spread out over the map. And this doesn't mean that they're bad athletes. It's just that priority is probably not as high, right?
Right.
And so I think for those type of athletes that really want, they want to say, I don't want to say like be told what to do. They want to be given something, look at it and say like, hey, how does this help me? And kind of given some choices, but in a, more, I guess, tailored way.
Yep.
So yeah, not just here's 1,000 things, look at the menu, pick it, right? Here are the 3 things we think are the best for you. You can pick any of these other things, but these are the ones that we think you would benefit you the most.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
That's really cool. Do you ever see software taking over completely from a training perspective? It sounds like you guys believe there's always going to be a coach to some extent that human.
I I don't think so. I think like what you find is that nothing beats a really good coach. And yeah, Ben Day, he coaches at Michelin Scott now, but he was at United Healthcare before, and he and I talked quite a bit. And one of the things that stuck with me is we were at a training camp, and he said, all these athletes, there's such a thin margin between all of them. They can all put up 400 watts. They can all do, such a tiny little margin. And his job as a coach, yeah, there's the training plans and all that, but they're all almost the same. They're so close. They're just,
Yeah.
crazy fast, crazy awesome, gifted athletes. But his job is to convince the few that can to like get over that hump, right? And just like it's so much mental part of it, like get them to trust, trust him, trust this, and trust themselves. And I think that's the part that is really, really hard, So that skill based stuff. So it's hard to teach skill. You look at swimming. And I'm sure there's a lot of video AI type of things that can correct you and do something around that. But skill-based stuff is always going to be a harder thing for computers to
teach.
do. Yeah. So, I look at swimming. It's no matter how you can use all the data in the world, but if your training method says, oh, this person just needs to swim more, like it doesn't mean that if they're a bad swimmer, they're never going to get faster, whether they do 10,000 yards or 1,000 yards. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, their technique is brutal.
There's no matter how much time you spend in there, you'll get really fit at swimming 2-minute hundreds, right? You'll be able to swim those forever. So I think that kind of stuff is definitely an area where computers are going to have a hard time. And then all the intangibles, the getting you over the hump, the helping you. A lot of times coaches aren't, they're life coaches too a lot of times. So I think the writing of the training plan and the finding the right method and the dealing with the schedules. People aren't very good at dealing with schedules. Computers are awesome at it, right? Like Google Calendar is really good at letting me know whose birthday it is in 5 months. Like I have no idea whose birthday it is, but it knows. And so let's let computers do what they do really well, and then let the human side do what they do really well. Plus, there's years and years of training, of methodologies and things that people have done, and so I think computers can do a lot of it, but at the same time, we're probably a long way off from it taking over, I guess.
I think there's something as simple as bike fit, which bike fit is not a simple topic. A computer can you can scan a human at this point, you can look at them and you can say, within a relatively short amount of time, this is going to give you a very thorough position, right?
Yeah.
But what if you hurt? What if something is wrong from that perspective? How does a human element be able to understand what that is and how to adjust that? Is not really something that we can easily put into a computer model. So, I think all of those little factors that help adjust an athlete to an overall efficiency with the help of a computer seems to make an awful lot of sense.
Right. And so, I think that's kind of our approach too, is you have this, again, bell curve of athletes, or this funnel of athletes, right? And there's a lot of them that, for one reason or another, whether it's money, whether it's they don't feel they deserve it or whatever, they're hesitant to go get a real coach, right? And there's a huge number of people in that bucket, right? And so what we want to do is help coaches that want to be involved and proliferate their training methodology, or proliferate like what they kind of are all about. And their philosophy to that next group of athletes, right? At a lower cost point. And some of those are going to say like, hey, I want to add a coach to this, or I want to move up to the next level. But a lot of those are going to be content just staying and at kind of this adaptive training type level. I always try and build things for me and what I would use, and I fit in that bucket like that. I mean, that's a perfect bucket for me. So, the Al Higdon model, I used it in beta testing to go race. I did two like ultra Ragnars, I guess. One was a 2-person team, and one was a 4-person team. And not having run in a while, I was a runner in the past, but not having run in a while, like I used it, and that was the only thing I used for training, along with the people that I was racing with. And we came out there, and I felt amazing. And we got first in one, and then second in the other. And it was, these are a bunch of dads that like we just off the couch and like getting into shape. So
That's sweet, man. That's a really good test. You built it, and then it worked for you. So that's
yeah, exactly. Like, so I mean, I'm selfish like that. It's like, I
yes.
want to build things that I like to use. So
That's good. That's awesome. Listen, man. Well, we really appreciate you having me on here. I think that makes a ton of sense, and I think obviously we know we're going in this direction, but it sounds like you guys are doing some really cool stuff at Training Peaks that's going to blend the best of both worlds. And I think that's
yeah, we hope so.
yeah.
Yeah. And again, if anybody has questions, feel free to reach out to me, rcooper@trainingpeaks.com. If you guys are putting that up there, and then we can get into all the nerd out things. And I apologize for it was going to be sweet. I was going to have this whole technical thing down, but it almost worked. So,
Do you have? I don't know if you can say or not. Maybe it's under wraps. But do you have any idea when you'll have a How type app for cyclists?
no, there was one in potential works, and then some COVID got in the way, unfortunately. So
COVID.
some COVID got in the way. So just the current state of things, we're focusing on how's the test bed. That doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of these. The way I kind of described it earlier, these coach personas. So you can have this one system where you have a lot of different inputs, and so there could be some cycling personas out there.
Cool. In the future. Awesome. Well, thanks, buddy. Really appreciate you being on here. Always a pleasure talking with you, and we'll get all this info out there.
All right. Bye.